before we get going, I just really feel it's important during this time to do kind of a check-in with everybody. There's just so much going on in our world, in our community, and in everybody's lives. And we all have different circumstances, but I don't think there is anyone who hasn't been significantly impacted by what's going on. So I just really want to acknowledge that, and not that I'm trying to have a group counseling session or anything, but just want to check in and make sure that folks are doing okay. And if there's anything you want to share, feel free. I'm not, again, not trying to push an intimacy that we don't want, but I know personally it's challenging. It's been a struggling time for me. I've got some other things going on in the background that have made it more challenging. And certainly recent events, just raise it all to a whole new level. So I don't know if anybody else wants to share anything, but wanted to give that opportunity. And since I can't see the whole screen, I'm hoping that Michelle is helping to monitor things for me as well. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you. Michelle, if you don't mind, can you bring up my PowerPoint? And I'm still trying to see if I can get on from my laptop. I was having some issues with my laptop yesterday that I thought were resolved. And they weren't this kind of issue. And then we can just move to the agenda. Oh, our welcome. And this is the same slide. That was the same slide from our very first meeting that said welcome to the first meeting, and now welcome to our last meeting. So just to review what we put together as our agenda, a quick check-in, discussion about the revenue measure, that staff report goes to council this Wednesday along with our budget adoption. Wanted to give an opportunity for the Morgan Hill Community Advisory Group, not to be confused with our Engage Morgan Hill group, a chance to share what they're doing and all of that. And then I wanted to give us a chance to review the year and hear from you about how things have gone, your biggest takeaways, the things that you would have done differently or would suggest improvement upon if we were ever doing something like this again. I think we've got the makings of a Citizens Academy here in perhaps a little bit different way, but with just a little bit of tweaking. I think there's a lot of value. We spent hours and hours pulling this together as staff, and it wasn't meant to be just for this one-year process and then tuck it away in a folder someplace. And then at the end, of course, a huge acknowledgement and thank you to everyone for all that you have devoted to this. Certainly your time and your ideas, and it's been so fruitful and helpful to city staff. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So if there's no comments about the agenda, then we'll move into our revenue measure discussion. We already checked in. So hopefully, since we had a little bit more time, since at the last minute I pushed the meeting out once again, thank you for your flexibility. I hope that you had an opportunity to take time to review the staff report about a revenue measure. I don't remember at this moment how many meetings ago, a couple of meetings ago at least though, there was more of a consensus towards it's not the right time to move forward with a revenue measure. That was staff's initial recommendation to council, that probably now is not the time, just based upon everything that's going on, the history of revenue, trying to move forward with revenue measures in this community, also is what we saw in the March elections. But some of you at least, gave feedback that you thought perhaps actually now is the time to move forward with a revenue measure. I think council heard that, and I think some of the council members themselves were of that opinion too. So we are coming back with a recommendation on some possibilities. And there's a couple things we're asking staff that, we're asking council, just saying, here's what we think we should be doing. And that is to move forward with a community facilities district, at least exploring that and trying to implement that specifically for new residential development. And what makes this different is because it's for new residential development, it doesn't have to go out for a vote in an election to the entire community. It simply is something that gets handled directly with property owners. And Chris, if I'm explaining that incorrectly, or Dat, please jump in. The other thing that we think, and have heard from a few in the community too, and looked at in depth several years back, is a special fire district. So that can't happen in this moment, but it's something that we believe we should be definitely researching and seeing if we can make that work to move forward with. What we are talking about in terms of possibilities and asking for specific direction from the council at this juncture is, okay, do we want to move forward with a revenue measure? Yes or no for November? And if so, do we want to move forward using the polling results from October, or do we want to go forward with new polling? And if Michelle, you could move to the next slide and we can just talk about the two options that we think are out there at this juncture that we perhaps could present to the community, the voters, and that would be a sales tax, which would be an additional 0.25, or a utility users tax. And so on the screen there, you'll see, kind of the basic information about, oops, that's about utility tax. Maybe we can move back to the sales tax also. Sales tax and UUT, or utility tax, are both general tax, so they only require a majority vote, not 2/3 from the voters, which makes it a little bit easier to pass something. The downside is it's a general tax, and so there's a little more latitude. Even if your intention is to spend it in one specific area, there is more latitude with a general tax than a specific tax. We're looking at potentially 2.3 million annually that could be brought in from increasing or having a local sales tax, which, as you know, still would not cover our unfunded needs for the future, but it could be a piece of it. And then if we go over to the utility tax slide, again, that's a general tax as well. Utility taxes aren't quite as volatile as sales taxes or sales tax. We would be suggesting a 5% rate potentially, and that would bring in a little bit more annually. 3.7 million is what we're projecting. So again, that alone doesn't solve our $6 to $7 million unfunded annual need in the future, but it could be a portion of it. So those are the two things that we're asking council to look at in terms of a revenue measure. We've talked to a couple different polling firms, one polling firm that we have used many, many times in the past, and then a new polling firm that, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit in the agenda, but it seems like it fits here. The new polling firm has also suggested being able to poll our Spanish-speaking voters, which would be a first time in our community for polling Spanish speakers. And so we think that's a positive possibility. And it's tricky to try and get a good read when you're testing two possible measures at the same time, but everybody's agreed that it's doable. And so we need to hear from council. Do they think we should move forward with new polling? It's about $35,000 to do that, or should we just go with what we polled in October, which I believe was sales tax only? And the polling actually wasn't, the focus of it wasn't really a revenue measure, but we did look at it. So there's pros and cons to both ways. And that's kind of where we are with the revenue measures and trying to get a read from council on how to move forward. Michelle, can you move to the next slide again? So there might be questions about that. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are, if you have any recommendations regarding this to council. And so kind of opening it up here for some conversation.
Hey, Maureen, this is Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Could you expand on the community facilities district and not having to take it to the voters?
Yeah.
If it's just new residents?
Right, because we're not talking about, if we were talking about doing that throughout the community, for all existing residents and new residential, then we would have to take it to the voters. Since we're talking about the possibility of it going into effect only for new residential development, then it does not have to go out to the voters in our community. Am I explaining that correct, Chris and Dat?
Yeah, Maureen, you're explaining it correctly. So it would start with the first, everyone has to annex, the new development would have to annex into the community facility district. So, but typically we have one CFD and some landscape assessment districts, but that's typically done by the single owner that before they subdivide or build the development, they vote to annex themselves in, and cities have done it that way, so that each new development just annexes into the community facilities district. But like Maureen said, that would only be applicable to development, and then you base the impact of the ongoing maintenance of those facilities that are developed with them to that is what they'd be funding, facilities or services. And I think Maureen referenced Milpitas has done it this way in several other cities.
I did not reference that, but I believe that that is in the staff report. Does that answer the question, Rick?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other? Am I causing that beep in the background, or is that someone else? Can't tell. Okay. Anyone else have questions, comments?
Marina, it looks like Steve is raising his hand.
Okay.
I just unmuted him.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm very torn about this decision. While I really, really strongly believe that this is absolutely necessary to get us partially back on track, I really don't think it can pass. So what do? If you don't believe it can pass, but you still feel that you have to try because the need is so great, that's kind of my reason for my ambivalence. So I really kind of feel for the council having to make this decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very challenging, and I think if you asked staff here today, we would agree that it's difficult to make this choice because it costs money to put a ballot on or put a measure on the ballot, and there's certainly, it's a difficult time. We don't have a history in this community that suggests it would be easy to pass any type of a revenue measure, and yeah, so I think we're right there with you. And it's, the other thing is, I guess, and this is a point that we make within the staff report and will be part of the presentation, the only way that we see this even having a chance of success is, if the council is a unified force on it and really goes out and campaigns for it. And the council can do that, and that at the same time there is a solid group of community members who either in addition to or working directly with the council support a big hardcore campaign as well. And that takes a lot of effort and time. It takes a lot of money. And, you know, we as city staff can offer some of the education around it, but beyond that, there's not much else that staff can do. So it's a big decision.
I would hope a lot of that community support would come from this group.
And that is obviously, you know, up to the group. And I mean, I think there are some of you who are in support of that. You know, it's an interesting thing to be in support of it versus ready to take action on it. And running, I mean, it's similar to running a campaign to get elected. You know, you're doing the same thing, except it's about a measure. And, you know, it takes time and effort. It takes a lot of getting out and talking to people in the community, helping to make sure that they really understand what this is about. And it takes, you know, frankly, combating the misinformation that quickly gets out about things like this. And there's certainly all kinds of misinformation about the city budget and how the city has managed their finances. And I hope at this point that all of you feel very knowledgeable about that. But, you know, I think sometimes the most successful campaigns really are the feet on the ground, knocking on people's doors and talking, which, I mean, and right now in our current circumstances, and, you know, it's unknown how this is going to unfold as we move into the fall. It might not be a time where we can go out and knock on people's doors and have those face-to-face interactions. So I know I'm seeing that Nancy had a question, and I think Shakib had a question.
Charles and Caitlin and Brian.
Okay, I'm so sorry. This is not ideal from my side of it, not being able to. So go ahead.
Charles, I know you've had your hand up when I called Steve, if you want to go, and I've seen Caitlin and Nancy and then Brian, if you guys are okay with that. Charles? It looks like you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Everybody's having fun with Zoom this morning.
Nope. Caitlin, do you want to jump in while Charles figures that out?
Sure. I had my hand up before Maureen started talking, and I just was going to echo pretty much exactly Maureen what you just said, except I was going to say it before you said it, so I guess it wasn't an echo. but
Hey, it can be an echo now.
But I do want to say it so that when you're taking feedback back to staff, back to council, that this is not just coming from staff, that you can also report your comments coming from us, that I totally agree with everything that Steve said, that on one hand, I feel like a revenue measure is something that we needed to have on the ballot years ago. On the other hand, I think now is a terrible time to put it on the ballot, and not only because I think it's going to be hard to pass, which I will, but also because I think that we need to be sensitive to what people are going through in the community. And so I think the only way that it can be successful is if the council not only does a strong campaign, but acts completely differently than the way that they acted in March, when they weren't united behind the hotel issue, and they weren't very vocal about the hotel issue. So I would push a little bit further and say, yeah, I feel for the council, but also they have to decide before they do this whether they're going to try to put the onus on everybody else or whether they're actually going to step forward and do something here. And just like the community is going through something, and I think we should be sensitive to that. I think also this group is, and so we all have, we're all in a different place now than we were a year ago, and might have different abilities to campaign for something like this now than we did a year ago. So So you can take those comments back, Maureen, and rather than you can agree with them, but rather than just coming from you, you can say that that's also, at least from some of us, the sentiment around here.
Thank you, Caitlin. And I would certainly encourage any of you who would like to or feel comfortable doing so to share those directly at the council meeting Wednesday night if you're able to. Who was next? Charles? Oh, we were having trouble with Charles.
Nancy and then Brian.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. My question's pretty simple about the polling. So when you did the polling last October, can you run by what the question was and what were the results?
Okay, hold on a minute and let me pull. Thank you, Nancy. I thought I had everything sitting right here. Going to excuse myself for a moment. Okay, so first of all, the poll was not done specifically for a revenue measure. I don't believe. Chris, Edith, or Dat, if you remember. Unfortunately, I was out for.
No, Maureen, the poll was for the sales tax measure.
Only.
And the community property tax community facilities district that
Okay.
would be citywide.
There you go.
That's what we pulled for. And I can,
Okay.
if you give me 2 minutes, I can pull those up if you don't have them.
Yeah, I have them in front of me. I just don't have them in a way I can share them on the screen. And first of all, remember, there's not just one question that gets asked in a poll. It's a whole variety of questions asked different ways and with very specific detail about the wording, because in a poll, they're using the same wording that would likely go on the ballot. So it's very, very specific. And as I'm looking at these results, and I don't know, Chris, if you can bring up that it was an attachment to although I have to say, looking at the attachment for the staff report, I mean, this is all the detail on the revenue measure, and it's difficult to look at. I think it's not going to show well on the screen. Anyway, the bottom line was there was not enough support to move forward. I think it was, I want to say, was it even 40% support for it? Does anyone remember?
Yes, it was more than 50% support for the sales tax. There,
Okay.
oh, Michelle.
Are you guys able to see the new?
Yeah.
Yep.
So this was the PowerPoint that Chris went through, I think.
Yes, it was, Michelle.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't get it up. I can't get onto our network.
Yeah.
No worries. You guys can just tell me how to navigate through.
Yeah, if you just keep moving forward, you can get to the screen. Keep moving. There you go. So so if you go one more. So if you remember, there were 3 tests, one at the beginning before they heard much about it, one after they heard some positive things, and one after they heard some negative things. And then the last one is what's called the informed. And so you could see that was for the community facilities district, the property tax results. So the definitely yes and probably yes and no. So the community facilities district was way below 50% on the yes and nearly 50% on the no at the end on the informed. And then if you move forward to the sales tax, you can kind of go to the third one again, the informed one. And the sales tax was slightly above 50% yes. But if you remember, we were talking about this would have been a special election in March, and it would have required 2/3.
Right.
And so even at the 50% level, the consultant said this would be really iffy to move forward even at this level with the sales tax, even for a general sales tax needing 50%, because the margin of error, I can't remember the margin of error, I think it was 5%, put us way below the 50%. So they didn't recommend moving forward even if it was a 50%. But as you can see, the polling for the sales tax was pretty split. So it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a chance now.
I saw Michelle McKay, I think, put a question in the chat about the polling or the Q&A. I do apologize, you guys. It's just like a comedy of errors here that I can't be on my laptop to see everything.
She asked if it was in Spanish, and the polling
No.
in October was not done in.
No, it was not done in Spanish. We've never done a poll that had a Spanish component to it, to my knowledge.
And I know Brian Sullivan has been waiting, and Steve Malik actually has his hand up over in the participants list.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. I agree with everything that's been said. My one question kind of that sticks in my mind is what is the cost to these citizens for each of these measures that we're asking them to approve? So if we have a cost, let's say for every $1,000 of household income, it's 10 cents or it's $10 or whatever. If we can give them that figure, then it's a lot easier for them to make a decision that they have something known that they're going to have to sign up to.
Sure. And I don't know if anyone has that handy in this moment. Obviously, a sales tax is a tax that both residents and non-residents, pay, because anybody coming through the city and doing any shopping here, purchasing gas, things like that, that all, so it's a combination. A utility tax, obviously, is just the residents of Morgan Hill. So those are two things, and we can, calculate out what that looks like in terms of some
I
of
think that would be very useful to have it calculated out for each of the ones that we're now going towards those two.
Actually, that's probably even handy for Wednesday.
Yes.
I'm jotting that one down. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
So Brian, one thing we were talking about, some of the sales tax is an interesting one because am I saying this right, Chris? It's 0.25% increase. And so if you say the average household of 4 spends $40,000 a year on taxable goods, which is a very high number, that costs them $1,000 a year. Now, most households are probably not spending $40,000 a year on taxable goods. Like, it would just depend if they bought a car or whatnot. But that's one that we can do some math on. I think what would be interesting is to figure out if we know what those average household spending looks like to give people some realistic numbers. But very much to Maureen's point, the sales tax is a nice one because anybody who gets gas in town is paying a sales tax. If I, for example, buy my groceries on my way home to Hollister, Morgan Hill's getting my sales tax on my groceries. And so that's one that I think if we move forward, have to articulate that to the voters that, yes, you are sharing in this cost, but you aren't fronting the entire bill, if you will.
Right. Thank you.
And then Steve Malik had his hand up. Steve, I think you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I've just got 2 comments. So one on the sales tax. I know it's a small percentage. I'm just concerned about the burden that it puts on already struggling retail in the city. It's going to there's going to be a lot of complaining, I would think, of those businesses that are struggling. The second comment is I think some other kind of property tax or utility tax to raise revenue will be okay. I think that the citizens of Morgan Hill can be really generous when they understand what it's for, how we got here, and what the consequences are if it doesn't happen. But we have to be really clear on the message. I don't think we can just say, well, it's just because of COVID, because obviously we had a deficit before, or we're looking at a deficit before COVID even hit. So I think we need to be clear that, maybe the message is, hey, we haven't had any increase in any kind of fees for a long, long time. And, things have been deferred, and without some kind of an increase, this is what's going to happen. We're going to have to shut down XYZ and, or go bankrupt. You know, obviously that can't happen. So if that's the case, I think it would pass. I think it's just how the message is presented. And that's my only comment.
Absolutely. Totally agree with what you're saying, Steve. A couple of comments I would share just even listening to how you're describing this is, you know, the reason we would go out for something right now still is for the unfunded needs in the future. It's not to solve our COVID problem. So that is, you know, that would still, go ahead,
Maureen,
Chris.
maybe if I could jump in too, but one of the things we do have to realize is we have an $18 million, COVID has taken $18 million. We'll be taking $18 million out of the city's bank account. So out of reserves or however we choose to do it, and we've made reductions. So to get to the level we were talking about of those unfunded needs for police, we now have farther to go because the police have proposed making reductions. We've made reductions in basic services. So although we can't blame it on COVID, it's made the hole bigger for us. And then the only other thing, to Steve's excellent points, which I agree with all of them, on the property tax versus the sales tax, the property tax and the community facilities district did not poll well. And historically, property taxes here do not poll well. So I think it'd be a much farther, even though your point on supporting, business with the sales tax, with the property tax as an alternate to the sales tax, we think because of the past polling that property tax is a much, much farther reach for us. And it just seems like the community members here are, from the polling results, do not prefer that property tax option.
Yeah, I guess one other comment I would just say is the right message isn't necessarily a simple message. And I mean, you need a simple message, but it's hard to get to a simple message. And I'm hoping that at this point in the game, all of you are also understanding that. And that's why I think sometimes the personal conversations are what needs to occur, because I mean, we're fighting against a lot of messaging out there that the city has mismanaged its budget. And that is, well, I'll just say in my opinion, that is not true. But, you know, and we've known about these unfunded liabilities sitting out there. We're not funding them. So it's not as if we've run ourselves into a hole. In this moment, we're not looking at bankruptcy at all. We are managing our money. We are managing expenditures and, you know, based upon revenues. But it's a hard conversation to have to explain what's out there. For instance, you know, we supposedly need a new fire station. Well, we haven't moved forward to build that fire station and staff it. We have reports that suggest we need more police officers. Well, we haven't run out and hired police officers without a way to fund them. So I think that's an important differentiation. It's not as if we have overspent and now we're trying to pull ourselves out of the hole. We know we have these needs and we don't have a way to fund them, but we haven't tried to fund them, you know, tried to move forward without the funding. Does that make sense, everybody?
Maureen, Kathy has typed in the chat, Kathy Sullivan, what revenue is received from online shopping? If not, a major shop local campaign is essential. COVID has created more online shopping habits that impact local tax revenue.
Absolutely correct. And I don't know if either Edith or Dat have the numbers for what we received from online shopping. Certainly there's been a huge shift to that. Edith and her team have planned a Shop Local campaign that's upcoming.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Edith.
You know, we are going to launch a Shop Local campaign, but and part of it is because COVID right now has had such an impact on the small businesses, and the timing is actually really good for us to, as we're launching the tourism branding, to tell the rest of the Bay Area, come to Morgan Hill, you know, we're safe and we have amenities. And also to remind folks to shop local. However, truth be told, based on what we have seen over the years and studies that have been done on shop local campaigns, they don't really generate much revenue. It's to a great extent a little bit of a feel good campaign, and eventually that's, you know, it's great. It might change some people's sort of spending patterns, but not to make any significant dent in any way. So those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you.
And then Rick Kent has some comments to share.
Yeah, this is Dad.
Oh.
Good morning. As for the revenue
Dad.
received from the online shopping for sales tax, typically if you purchase on site in Morgan Hill, we receive 1% of the tax. So basically, you spend $100, the city will receive $1. But you purchase online, then we only receive about 2% of that $1.
So a
Because
lot.
it's based, yeah, it is based on the city's proportionate share of the countywide sales tax collection. And our shares is only about 2%.
And for us, even when you shop online, so especially right now with COVID, but even before, you can order online and pick up at the store. If you say, for example, shop online at Target without picking up at the store, we don't necessarily get the sales tax here. It goes back into the pool. So for us to get the sales tax, you need to pick it up at the store of your municipality.
Rick, I think you can go ahead, and then I'll call Shakib.
Okay. Well, I guess a couple of comments. One, I agree with what Steve and Caitlin and Brian have all said, you know, and I think we do support some form of tax measure and are a little bit hesitant because of everything that's happened in the past and support for taxes. I guess one clarification, if you do spend $40,000, what's it going to cost me for that 0.25%? You know, 10% is 4,000, 1% is 400, a quarter is only 100. So let's, you know, I think that's a good statement or a good communication message to have for the city council and eventually for the voters. I do like the community facilities district for new residents. That essentially has them help pay for, you know, fire safety and police. That's the demand they basically create. We had and I guess I support probably the sales tax more than the utility tax. I think the utility tax would impact low-income people more, where the sales tax, it's kind of up to them on what they're buying. Previously, when we were just talking about our $6 to $7 million deficit, we had a conversation about declaring an emergency. What was that, and what would the advantages be?
So Rick, the only advantage was declaring an emergency. You could put a general tax on the ballot in March. So otherwise you can't do a general tax in March. You would have to do it at the regular election. So that was why we had that discussion.
So we're headed for November, and it doesn't make any difference at this point.
That's correct.
True. And there's a lot of things that come with declaring emergency, though, that are not necessarily positive. So.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Shakib?
Okay, there we go.
Hi, I just got a quick question. The 2.3 million in tax revenue from the additional 0.25% increase in the rate, is that based on pre-COVID revenues, or how are we coming to that number? And because as we know, even as we're opening up, sales and revenues are not as what they used to be, and they might be like that for a foreseeable future.
True. Dat, can you address that?
I'm sorry, I missed a part of the question. Can you repeat the question?
Did we make any adjustments in our projection for what the sales tax increase might bring in revenue from Morgan Hill? Is that pre-COVID, or were any adjustments made based upon what we're seeing? I'm guessing it was COVID.
Yes, we did for the sales tax specifically. Initially, before pre-COVID, we cities collect about over 10 million in sales tax revenue. So a quarter of 1% would generate additional 2.5 million. But because of the COVID and our projected reduced revenue, we reduced it down to 2.3 as written in the staff report.
Okay. Okay. So it was adjusted for COVID based upon what we know in this moment.
Exactly.
Obviously it's a moving target.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions and comments out there, Michelle?
Looks like Steve Tate, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to argue a little with Rick on sales tax versus utility users tax. I think knowing that we're the lowest city in terms of tax revenue or revenues, period, in the county, so you ask why, and you look at what our neighbors have. Gilroy has a utility users tax, and San Jose has a utility users tax. And I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of selling the voters on supporting it. And that seems to me like a pretty strong argument if we can get them on board. And I understand what Rick's saying about the nature of being able to control the sales tax a little better for the people that are in real need. But being consistent has a strong argument as well, I think.
And that probably goes to doing a poll before we actually do a revenue measure, because that may get more support than the sales tax.
Good point.
Are any of you thinking of participating at the council meeting on Wednesday night to provide any of this input directly to council?
Sure.
Steve Tate says sure.
Yeah, I think that there will be some of us at the meeting, and after reviewing especially the budget over the weekend, we probably, some of us, and we'll probably talk about that on our meeting on Monday, some of us will probably speak up about certain things that we think the council should consider.
Okay. Okay, any more discussion on this before we move on to our next agenda item?
I just wanted to it's Caitlin. I just really wanted to quickly add that my feelings about the sales tax measure are different in COVID, and which utility tax to me seemed more likely, because not only the comments that were already made about supporting local businesses that are struggling, but also because our shopping habits are changing, which we also talked about. But there's even things like, I just sent Edith a private message, but currently the Target in Morgan Hill has shut down their curbside pickup. So the moms group that I'm a part of, all of the moms in Morgan Hill are now doing Target pickup in Gilroy. So that's a huge amount of tax revenue that we get on a regular basis that's moving into other cities. So, you know, I think that on one hand, of course we need to go out and we need to do polling, and we need to see what works, but also we need to be educating people on what's happening and what the current climate is, because what seemed more viable even a year ago has just the landscape has just completely changed.
Yeah.
And Maureen, if I may, thank you, Caitlin. I had not seen the message. I wanted to also just chime in if some of you, I think, joined us yesterday. We had a ULI technical advisory panel And this is Urban Land Institute, and they came to take a look at our industrial and retail commercial properties and provide us some guidance on what to expect going forward. I thought it was a very rich conversation. It certainly gave us a lot of food for thought. But also, you know, one of the struggles that every community is dealing with is that retail continues to be shrinking. COVID has now expedited that. So what we can expect is a lot of vacancies and very little new commercial retail development. And I really encourage you, if you get a chance to see that PowerPoint, maybe we can, and the presentation was recorded. I think it's very valuable. We can send that to you afterwards, as I think we're still getting the recording and the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great, Edith. I think that's a super idea.
And then Jennifer had some comments.
Yeah, thank you. I'm agreeing with all of the turmoil that's going on here with everybody with their opinions. But when we talk about the polling and you talk about the utility tax and the struggle that it might cause some of the lower income families in our community, then I would advise the council to go forward with new polling and certainly add the Spanish questions to that poll, because it would capture, stereotyping here, and I apologize for that, it would capture more of the lower income families and how it would affect them. Because what I'm hearing now, the sales tax is a lesser burden for people, but we're not getting the sales tax. The fact that Target's not doing curbside, and I think people need to understand about the online shopping and the sales tax that we don't get, period. So that's part of it. If we're doing a sales tax campaign, that's got to be part of it. But I do think that a new polling is very necessary for any kind of a revenue measure going forward.
Yeah, I guess I should probably clarify. I think as staff, we've decided that the polling firm we would move forward with is the one that can do the Spanish component. Actually, it's a decision that we could make without council direction. It's within the amount is something that can be approved without council approval, but it may require a budget adjustment because we stripped all of those things from the budget when it looked like we were going in the direction of no revenue measure. You know, we took out the funding to actually put the revenue measure on the ballot. We took out the funding for polling, all of that in our efforts to, manage the budget. So I think it's just, we want to be clear about that as we ask council for direction. Thank you.
And then Steve Malik has his hand up.
Yeah, so the one comment I wanted to make is how we get the message out. And I think that social media has had a pretty big negative impact on, the way people feel about our budget and council decisions, et cetera. And sometimes I've gotten on there and tried to, I guess, neutralize to a certain effect that misinformation.
Yes, kudos to you, Steve Malik. I frequently see you jump in on testy conversations.
Oh yeah, I put on my protective gear and just walk in there because I know I'm going to get hammered.
Yeah, I was like, you are a brave soul.
I'm just kind of numb. So anyway, I feel like a lot of times I'm the only voice out there. And I think that I don't like political discussions on social media, but I also feel like I have a duty to try and get some message out there. And it would be helpful if there were more people, giving a similar message, because again, I feel like I'm the lone voice, and
That's me.
Hello?
Sorry, that was Maureen.
Okay, so yeah, sometimes I get accused of being on somebody's payroll or being a shill for something, and I said no, I'm just trying to give the other side here. And so if anybody wants to join me, maybe we can talk about how that message gets put out more effectively. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Steve. Now I am on my laptop. Hurrah, I can see everybody. Sorry about that.
And Maureen, if I could just add something to Steve's comment, I think it's a really good comment, and I think it'd definitely be something as the council reviews this that you make the same comments to the council that you're talking to us about. I think that's important.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I think that what I've seen happen, and I mean, I remember this way back to when we were going through the downtown construction and that complete street project. I literally would be in different places and people would tap me on the shoulder and share their thoughts, which generally were positive and good. And they said, I just wanted to share this with you, but I don't feel comfortable jumping into those conversations on social media or next door because they're so negative and I don't want to be in the middle of that. And that is a problem, because then out there in those forums, that can sometimes become the only voice that people are hearing. So, and we as the city can jump into some of those conversations, but not all of them. It's certainly not appropriate for city staff to be having a back and forth battle with someone on social media. So it's way more powerful when community members can jump in a thoughtful, knowledgeable, well-informed manner and just, be a different voice. And actually, I would say, Steve Malik, you do a really good job of that. And I've been aware of that many times. That you do just that, and you don't really argue. You just keep putting forth in what seems like a calm voice that's knowledgeable and that's just sharing, a different viewpoint, which in my experience has been a more factual viewpoint. So the more people we have in the community who are willing to do that, I think the better. But it's a big ask, because you can become the target, and that's certainly not fun. And it also can be a time-consuming thing. So anything else before we move on, which this is a nice segue perhaps into the Morgan Hill Community Advisory Group. Is that fine if we move forward and hear what they've been doing?
Yeah, and I think it's a perfect segue, because I think we can talk a little bit about what we're hoping to accomplish. So
Sally just joined us. Hi, Sally.
Hi, Sally. So just to give a tiny bit of background, the Morgan Hill Community Advisory Group, we're calling ourselves, if you can just go with me and think of it separately from the Engage Community Advisory Group. I thought it was safe because Maureen pretty exclusively calls this group Engage. But maybe we should have gone in a completely different direction, but it's too late now. So you'll have to just go with me. But it started, if you remember, when Maureen was out and Michelle and Chris and Harjot led a meeting, and we put up on the board sort of the different potential groups. And Nick and I both, Nick Gaish, who wishes he could be here. I don't know if you shared this, Maureen, but he's having issues at his restaurant this morning, so he apologizes. But they're trying to get back online at the restaurant, and they've got a little fire, not real fire, but metaphorical fire he's got to put out today. So Nick and I both were of the opinion that one thing that became clear to us in the Engage process, and for me before that, was that we wished that there was some overarching messaging that was happening. And a lot of the desire for this came out of social media, that I think that Maureen and the staff does a really great job of giving lots of information to the community, but the community is not always engaged. And so people are having a hard time, I think, pulling away the sort of top message or the single message that maybe they should be focusing on. And because of that, my opinion of social media has changed. So originally when I was on council, my feelings of social media was that hate is a lot louder than truth and kindness. And so it was better not to wade in the waters of sort of the extreme sort of negativity that was happening on social media. But I think what's happening is that even though that group started as a minority, if there's not a competing voice, then they do have influence. And so the hope is that the Morgan Hill Community Advisory Group, which is made up of about 13 of us, which pretty much it's the majority of you all. Our hope is that we can be an independent voice, that it's really important that we're self-governed. We're not on city payroll. We're not shills of the city. And our goal is to present factual information to the community, and also try to get people to engage, to give feedback that we can then report out. I think this is the first step to sort of regaining the trust of the community that we felt was lacking, particularly after the results of the March election. That before a group or people could go out and advocate for a position, the first step was to rebuild trust and to get some truth out into the community. So the group of us, we're meeting on Mondays at 3:00. It's sort of been our standing time. If you'd like to join our group, like I said, there's the majority of us on now, but there's a couple people here who are not, and you're welcome to join us if you'd like. But basically what we're doing is I'm making infographics, which is not a thing that I've ever done before, but I've made all of the infographics for this. Jody is heading up our email account. Charles is doing our MailChimp email blasts. And so what we're doing is we are creating infographics. The latest one I just put out was Friday, when the budget agenda was released, to highlight to the community and say, hey, this is something you should pay attention to. It goes on our Facebook page. It goes out onto our email list. And then we encourage people to send an email back to us with feedback that we can then give unsolicited. I mean, that we can give unbiased back to the council. What I'm hoping is that if we don't encourage a back and forth on the Facebook page, then people feel like they can just anonymously give us their feedback. Then they won't be afraid of being attacked, and we can get more people to interact with us. I didn't check this morning, but the last I checked, we already have 150 people on our Facebook group, and our large infographic, which introduced us and introduced the budget issues, was up to 790 engagements on social media, meaning that it had reached 790 people. So we will continue to operate even after the budget is passed. We'll continue to operate to give this sort of factual information. And I think what probably will happen is that a separate group, maybe community action group, has been suggested. A different group will emerge that can do the advocacy piece if we do move forward on a tax measure or something else. I will not be leading that group, and neither will Nick. This sort of factual piece is what we've we're committed to, but I think there will probably be a lot of crossover between our group and a potential action group. Does anybody, any of my other teammates want to add? And on this call right now, we've got the Shakib, Jennifer Tate, Steve Tate, Brian Sullivan, Rick Kent, Nancy, Chris, I'm sorry, Charles, Kathy Sullivan, Doug Muirhead, Jody. Those are our team members for that project. Does anybody else from my team want to jump in? Did I miss anything?
Steve Malik has his hand up.
So I have a question and a comment. The question is, you said that the meetings are Monday at 3. How do we join that?
They're on Zoom. So Steve, if you, and I've loved everything that you've had to say today. So I would love it if you joined our group. If you want to shoot me an email, my email address, this is getting recorded. Is it getting posted somewhere, Maureen?
It will be. It will be posted on our YouTube.
So you can just ask Maureen for my email address and
that sounds great.
Yeah, I can connect the two of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to make a quick, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I had a comment, and it was about what you said about social media. I agree with you. At first, I was thinking that it would, just ignore these guys and they'll go away. But it really does kind of snowball into a community consensus. And that's why I felt like I had to jump in. So I was just agreeing with you on that point.
Jody,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to call Jody.
Yeah, so thank you. I just want to reiterate what Caitlin's talking about. And with me handling the email, we basically right now it's just anybody so far that has wanted to join the email list. But as we put information out, and then we get the comments in, I just want to agree and reiterate that this will be a safe place for people to leave comments and then to get them back. For instance, maybe somebody, they don't want to go to social media because they know it gets messy and hairy out there and negative, but they also, maybe it's hard for them to get to council meetings, or just, sometimes it's, I'll be honest, a lot of people go to city council, that's boring, whatever. But if they have an avenue, okay, this is a specific issue, yes, I have some specific comments, then they can leave them in a safe place where, we're going to have the emails come in, and then we're going to, record their information in a spreadsheet and collate it and get it back to the city council, city staff. So I just want to say, I think this is a really positive way, because when I look at like Nextdoor or whatever, and I see really ugly comments, it's like, I don't even want to jump into that at all. I don't even bother reading. And so I think this will be a real positive way, a safe way, so to speak, for people to to leave their comments and get them back to the decision makers in the city.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that we know that we've been successful because we've already been quoted in the Morgan Hill Times, which I thought that was, they were going to write an article introducing our group. I thought that that's what the article was, but that article actually hasn't been written yet. And so I think that they just have started to use us as a source, which is great, which means that we're doing the kind of influence that we want. But I do have a journalism background. It's what I majored in college. And so my commitment is to continue to fact check numbers with city staff, but not get our message approved by city staff. Our message comes from us, it's organic. But that anytime we have any numbers, that those are all things that the staff agrees are factual information, which I think that if I could just have all of you out in the community to, at some point, I'm sure the tide will turn on us and we'll get called shills and whatever, but just so that everybody out there knows that this is really a community-led project by citizens who are interested in community dialogue. And for me, I'm interested in helping people engage to be involved in the democratic process and civic engagement. And I think this is the best way to help that process at this point. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to all of you who are participating in that way. That is so awesome, and in fact was, you know, a hoped for outcome of this group. So that is excellent. Any other questions or comments about the Morgan Hill Community Advisory Group or anything? And then what I thought we could do is move into kind of a review of the year and get some input back from you on where to take what we've done this year for the future.
Yes, Sally has her hand up also.
Ah, okay.
I want to thank you for sending me the email on this meeting. And I just wanted to say, Robin, thank you for leading. And you guys are all organized. I had no idea when the meetings were going to be held. So I would like to be included in that. I'm just noticing that there's not that many minorities that are involved. And I think it would really help. I mean, I'd be willing to help in spreading the word. So Maureen, if you can just email me the time and the date for that. Okay, I know it's Mondays at 3 p.m. Where that's going to be, where the meeting's going to be held. And then, because I'd like to participate in that community advocate. And I also wanted to give kudos for the translation in the announcement for the engaged.
Sally, we would
you.
love to have you, and we've talked a lot about, you know, trying to represent our Spanish speakers and more of our minority groups. So I will send you all of the information. We'd love to have you join our Zoom calls, and we'd love to help. I don't know if you can help with translation, but we'd love to continue to have translation if that's something you can help with. So I'll connect with you offline. I had a question, Maureen, just logistically about Wednesday. I don't know if you're planning on the council meeting to, I didn't see anything like this in the agenda, but if there's going to be a specific time that you call for comments from this group, or whether, I'm just thinking logistically, whether members of our group should be participating as just members of our CAG group, or if there's going to be some kind of wrap up or comment period with the council related to this group as well.
There will not be a wrap up and comment period this council meeting in relation to this Engage Morgan Hill process. I would encourage you, unless someone disagrees with me, to please, as either members of Engage or as this new independent group, to at least somehow be represented and share, you know, your comments. It's more powerful to hear it directly from you than it is for staff to repeat what they've heard. What I would like to do at a future council meeting is do kind of a overall wrap up for council and, you know, an acknowledgement of all of you for, I mean, this has been a long haul. And several of you have been here from the beginning, which is a year ago. So if that makes sense, that's what I would suggest. Does that sound all right to everybody? And so I would just say during public comment on those items. And Michelle, I haven't even looked at the actual posted agenda that got posted yesterday. Where in, I'm assuming that the revenue measure and the budget are early items?
I keep muting myself and then forgetting to unmute. Yes, I'm pulling it up right now. I believe that the budget item is the first item after consent, and then the revenue measure follows, but let me just confirm. So the budget adoption is item 11, so it's the first non-consent item, and then the revenue measure is item 12.
Okay. And, you know, I honestly don't know what to expect this time around. Typically, budget adoption, by the time we get here, that's a pretty cut and dry, you know, there's not a lot of conversation. Council just, you know, adopts the budget, it gets approved, and bam. This Wednesday, there might be more conversation around it, just because of our current circumstances, and, you know, so I don't know what to expect. And if that turns into a lengthy conversation, you know, that pushes the revenue measure back to a later time. And I certainly understand that is not necessarily ideal for very many people. Even as council and as staff, it gets pretty difficult to hang with those meetings that go so late. And of course, then be cognizant and, you know, able to really provide intelligent input, or, you know, whatever is required. So I don't know what to anticipate, whether there will be a lot of discussion or if it will be, you know, we'll note the things that have changed, move forward, adopt, and then quickly go into the revenue. You just have to put that out there. And I don't think there's really a way around that. And Michelle, is there any way that there could be input provided by this group or the independent group separate from the agenda item, since both items are agendized?
No, there isn't.
Do you mean, can I speak this morning, as an alternative to speaking at the meeting?
No. Speaking at the meeting, I guess I'm just concerned. I mean, and I don't know, maybe the agenda, I mean, and I haven't looked at consent. There could be a couple of things, I believe, on consent that could get pulled, which then pushes things out. It's just, you know, right now it's just so hard. I think it's harder now than it normally is, and it's hard in general to manage timeframes for the agenda, because sometimes certain items end up taking longer than was anticipated. So I guess what I was wondering, is there a way that we could get, like, for instance, if the budget item is going on and on and on, I don't know, I guess I'm just saying, is there any way we could have a time where we could have this group make their public comment about potentially both items, I suppose, or is that just, there's no way to do that? Because that,
I think it would be challenging, because if we set a time and the item hadn't come yet, then they couldn't technically comment on it. Looking at the items, you know, hopefully, obviously there's always the opportunity for something to be pulled from the consent calendar. And I think given this agenda, there's that possibility for a few items. I think looking at it, it's always kind of safe to guesstimate that we probably wouldn't speak on these items before like 7:45. Just looking at, we have a Sobrato valedictorian, we're gonna play the Yak video, and then we do have the consent calendar. So if people wanna kind of plan around that time to be available. And also, if, you know, trying to hang on that late, or if it's going too late, we do have the CC public comment. You can email to that. I mean, obviously, I think hearing your voices is much more powerful than an email. But sometimes it's nice to be able to gather your thoughts and put them in email form. And you can email ccpubliccomment@morganhill.ca.gov. And that we forward to the city council. So that's going to Christina and the clerk staff and the city attorney. And then we forward that to the city council. And so that's a nice way, because you're getting it both to your higher level staff and the city council, and then it becomes a supplement to the agenda. You can also just email the city council directly. But those are a couple other opportunities if the meeting does go a little later, or sometimes people aren't comfortable speaking to the council. And I really want to encourage those of you that are willing to share your thoughts and feedback. I think it's really powerful for the council to hear it from each and every one of you, or as many of you as are willing to share your thoughts.
yeah, I would echo that. So thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. Okay, Michelle, if you want to quickly bring up the PowerPoint presentation again, and we'll move into kind of a quick review of this past year, and then we can have some conversation around that and get some more input from you guys.
Maureen, are you able to see the PowerPoint? Or team, are you able to see the PowerPoint?
No, did anyone else see the PowerPoint?
I'm getting some nods.
I see it.
I see
I
it.
see it.
Boy, I wonder what the heck is going on. Anyway, I cannot see it. Now that I'm actually on my laptop, I can see all of your faces, but I can't see the, I'm just wondering if, I queued it up again for me. I'm wondering if I can share my screen.
Do you want me to stop sharing so you can try to share?
Stop sharing and let's see if it will work. Of course. Okay, please share again.
Okay, so we're up and we're on review of year.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to jump to my own version since I can't see that one. And I just thought it was really important. You know, there may be other times when we gather, but I mean, this is kind of the official end of this year that most of us have spent together. And I just thought it's important to kind of go back and reflect on, you know, why did we even do this and where we've come from and so forth. And I think, you know, if all of you were asked why, I'm sure you could answer this, but I thought it was important to remember that, you know, the city has seen these unfunded liabilities, unfunded needs out there and known that we have to figure out a solution. We've had looked for a few different possibilities that were not successful. And so we felt it was really important that we engaged the community, brought the community in at a different level to really be aware and understand, you know, what we're facing and really have a baseline understanding of the city services, how they are funded, our budget, and you know what these unfunded needs and liabilities are, and you know why do we even have them. And so, you know, just reminding us all of the why. And then, you know, the goal really was to educate and increase awareness out in the community, especially a specific group of community members who were really willing to dig in and, you know, go through a process with us. So we never anticipated that this process alone was going to inform the whole community. We were hoping to really be able to inform a smaller group, a subset of our community, you know, hear from you, receive input from you, and then encourage you to be sharing this information out. Obviously, we from the beginning suggested that we wanted you to be a part of the current budget process that we are just coming to the end of for our next 2-year budget. And we hoped that there would be an independent group that would come out of the Engage Morgan Hill group that would continue to, I mean, you know, you figure for those of you who've really stayed with us for the majority of the year, and even, you know, people who've had to jump in and out, this has been an extensive learning process. And, you know, we would consider you highly informed residents now. Most people haven't had the opportunity or couldn't have even committed to taking this much time to better understanding how the city runs and operates and how we're funded and you know how the budget works. So in many ways, much of the goals have been reached. Obviously, you know, the other part of this was trying to figure out solutions for these unfunded needs with the possibility of moving forward with a revenue measure. If you look at where we were 1 year ago to where we are today, a lot of things have happened, and perhaps we could move to the topics covered, and then we'll just kind of look at the issues that have happened in the community. You know, this was an extensive conversation with all of you. We talked about the budget, economic development, housing and growth, what the impact of SB 330 would be, infrastructure, traffic issues, our whole highly successful recreation programs, and which of course has taken a huge impact during COVID, and pensions, public safety. You know, we really went in depth on a lot of topics. We covered pretty much everything that you need to know and understand in the city. The backdrop to this, though, were some pretty impactful things that either really impacted staff, have really influenced the community's perspective. And certainly one of them has been Trammell Crow, the Morgan Hill Technology Center, just the reaction of the community to that, the level of input that we as city staff received, which has required and continues to require just a very, very high level of commitment and time to address community concerns and to share good information, and to really look at how we modify our processes for the future, which we've actually done a lot of in relation to development projects. The Ford store shooting happened the week, if I remember correctly, the week before our first meeting. And while, I mean, personally, that was impactful to me, I know that a lot of people in the community felt impacted, and I think just looking at it in a broad way, that was something very different for Morgan Hill to experience. And those things affect how the community feels. You know, right on the heels of that, a month later, was the Gilroy Garlic Festival mass shooting, which, you know, although it occurred in Gilroy, they are a very close neighbor. So many of us participate, if not go to visit and be part of that festival that has been part of South County life for many, many, many years. And I think that was another just huge awakening to South County for Gilroy's community and ours, that, wow, you know, we're not immune to these things. So another big impact to, and that there were a lot of our own Morgan Hill city staff who were involved in offering support, not just in the midst of that with our own public safety, but, you know, ongoing as they continued to have their emergency operations center open and, you know, were fielding questions and sharing information. So that was quite impactful. Late last summer, we started dealing with public safety power shutoffs, and we spent a lot of time getting prepared for those long before we ever experienced them. And again, just something that, you know, was impactful to the community, but also was very impactful to staff time. And, you know, you've had a team of city staff working with the Engage Morgan Hill process, who all were actively impacted and involved in all these other things too. So it's been quite an impact just even on city resources. The outrage, and perhaps I shouldn't call it outrage, but concern about the Shoe Palace expansion and how that expansion was approved. And then, of course, most recently, COVID-19 and the impact that's had in our daily lives, to our livelihood, our businesses, our work, and certainly the city's budget. And then, you know, even more recently, the civil unrest across the country as we deal with, you know, the challenging issues of racism and police brutality and, you know, all of that. And our community, fortunately, has not been a victim to lootings, but, you know, we've had, I think now 5 protests. All have been peaceful, but again, takes a lot of city resource to help support those things, to ensure that they go well, and of course impacts our overall community and how they're feeling and what they're thinking and their experience of local government. And I'll just add in my own unexpected leave of absence for 2 months following the death of my brother. Certainly happened at a kind of a critical juncture in this, and was impactful to other city staff in trying to keep this rolling and not let it fall apart. So that to me is kind of a broad overview. And what I wanted to to get from all of you was, what were the most important takeaways from this year-long process? And on the other side, what things could have been improved? What would have made this more useful, more helpful? So, and I don't think any of you are shy about being honest and open, and that's what we'd like to hear. I mean, kind of a critique of this. And then I'm just going to put these all out at once, and we probably don't need to share the screen anymore, Michelle. But, I think we have here a really good foundation for what could be a citizens academy if it was tightened up over some different timeframes, probably not a year-long process, and with just a little bit of tweaking and updating. Whether or not we truly will have the resources over the next few years as we deal with all these budget impacts, I don't know, but we've done the hard work to put together what is now put together. So I'm going to be quiet and let all of you talk.
Roger?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I have been hiding in the bunker for the last 3 months. So I have not been active in this group, but today I had a chance to attend this. Couple of my observations. I have lived for over 35 years in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, what I learned now is there is something called a 9th Street divide. The East lives in a different world than the West, the 9th Street divide. So that is the one which seemed to be haunting Louisville. Another lady here, she mentioned about she would like to see more minorities speaking up. Okay. So that is, I am a minority in the privileged minority. I just take my time, and then even though I am retired and I am attending all this, but our challenge should be, how do you get those minorities whose voices are not heard into this city council? Remember, Louisville is 20 times bigger than Morgan Hill in terms of population, at least. But then what did we learn from cities like Minneapolis and Louisville is that there is not adequate participation of that population which are not represented. Surprisingly, I see something here. Many of the police chiefs in all these cities, they are minorities. Okay, some of these cities have mayors who are minorities, but somehow all these problems explode. So we have to break that barrier and reach out to the significant minorities who are not, their voices are not heard in all these forums. That is my comment.
Thank you, Roger. I think Nancy was next.
Thank you for reviewing all that, the outside things that have happened in the past 12 months. Seeing that in writing was like, wow, we have had quite the year. I mean, individually and as a society. So thank you for putting that out there. To answer your question about reviewing the year and what we thought would be areas of improvements, I think other people have said this too, that during our meetings, it was mostly we were kind of taught to or lectured to. I mean, in a traditional classroom setting, we would have, I know I would have, and other people had more time to have some discussion groups during the meetings. We really did learn a lot, and I really appreciated that, but there was never a time to just kind of chat amongst ourselves. I mean, there were some extra meetings we came on random days for that, but that would be one recommendation. But thank you for this whole opportunity. And I'm excited about the idea of a Citizens Academy. I think that's, I'd be very interested in helping with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm not seeing, are there others who would like to share thoughts?
I just also wanted to jump in and say, I think the Citizens Academy is a great idea. I really, and so that it's not so much, you know, stress on yourself, Maureen. I like when we, you know, had Edith come and talk about economic development and sort of break it up. And I think that, you know, it could even be a 6-month academy, and you could divide up the meetings into the different sections. And, you know, I think that for a long-term goal of helping people understand the government and the way that their tax dollars work at a local level, I think that that's really important. And I think that there should be an effort to outreach to people other than sort of the 5 people that always show up at the city council meetings. And I agree with Nancy's comment that it would be really great. I know that we have limited period of time, but it would be really great to allow people time to check in more with each other. And you gave kind of a caveat today about, you know, you didn't want to force any sort of relationship that wasn't there, but we have been together for a year. And I think we have seen your list of everything we've been through together. We've been through a lot. And I think that there's an even greater opportunity for this group and another group like it in the future to kind of come out as, you know, the class of 2020 that may continue to get together or continue to advocate for things. And I think that there's an opportunity of having even more of a relationship built up among the participants.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Allie is waving her hand.
Allie?
Sally?
Sally. Sally. Hi, Sally. Sorry. You need to unmute, Sally. There you go.
Okay. So I just want to say that I wouldn't be able to comment on anything here if it wasn't for all of the work that you've been doing, Maureen, and all of the people that from the city that have organized this. Just kind of looking forward, I've learned so much from all of the meetings. I'm sorry I didn't somehow connect with the CAG meetings. But looking forward, I feel that where we are right now in our country is going to change a lot of the funding that that was in a certain way is going to be different. And I feel that a lot of attention is going to be put into the community. So I'm really positive about having a lot of support from the state and federal government as far as the community involvement. That was just my 2 cents on that, but thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you, Sally. We really appreciate your participation in this. Thank you so much. Kathy Sullivan put a comment in the chat. Citizens Academy would be a good counter for social media misinformation, challenge people to attend to get the facts. It certainly would. It's only a good counter if then people are willing to speak freely and share the factual information. You know, we have, my guess is as we get our new census data, we're probably going to be a population of around 50,000. And, you know, even if we move forward, are able to, which I hope somehow we can figure out how to move forward with something similar to a police academy that perhaps could happen on an annual basis. You know, you figure you probably only have about 20 people every time. Now, if all those 20 people go out and share each person 20 more and 20 more and 20 more, it can expand. But I think a lot of times we get the information and it stays more within a small circle rather than being shared broadly. And so I truly challenge all of you, and I know that many of you are intending to do that, but to, you know, keep sharing what you know as factual. in every opportunity and forum that you have available to you. There's Brian Sullivan. Yep. Brian, you're muted.
I would just like to say thanks to you, Maureen, and all your teammates, because I know it's taken a lot of time and effort and off hours that you had to put these things together and 10 meetings. And, you know, I, for one, appreciate that, because I know the amount of effort that you had to go through to pull everything together and be prepared for the meetings. And also enlightening us in different ways about the budget, other things that we were presented. Because knowledge is a great thing, and it's how you use that knowledge is really what is meaningful, I think. So from this team standpoint, I think we're more knowledgeable given the facts that you've given us. And now, what do we do with that knowledge? How do we get that out to the rest of the citizens is the important thing. And I think this other committee that's involved, this CAG committee, is one great way. I believe that Citizens Academy is a great thing. I know the Police Citizens Academy is a great thing, and people go through that, and the QEF and the other groups that are out there. You know, it's just wonderful for a community like ours to get so many different things with so many people engaged in different ways. And everybody can't do everything. But if we can get the word out to many of those other organizations, then I think it's going to benefit the year's time that you took to put this together for us. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else?
Steve Malik has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Maureen, and I wanted to thank all of the people on this group who have put in a lot of time and energy into trying to do something positive for the community. And I do think or agree with you, Maureen, that the message has to get out there. What I found on social media is that there's a small group that has some pretty negative opinions, but they're effective because they work like a team. They're coordinated and they work together. And I only think it seems to me that I'm always seeing about the same 7 or 9 people and having to deal with them. And, you know, you just have to have a thick skin and stick to your message as long as you absolutely believe in it, of course. And eventually it kind of wears them down a little bit. But yeah, they're effective because they work together. And I think we can do the same thing.
Yeah, I would agree on that, Steve. I think there's a few people who do work very effectively together, and they're loud. And while it might only be a few people, they're getting their message out broadly. And if there's no counter message to it, then just like any of us, if you don't know what you don't know, you might be easily swayed or believe, or if in the moment you're frustrated about maybe even broader issues that aren't local issues, it's easy to get on the bandwagon to be frustrated with your local government. And it may not even be something your local government has any control over. So thank you, Steve. I am looking to see if I see any other hands.
Doug has his hand up.
Hi, Doug. I can't see your hand. So thank you.
Oh, well, I guess that's why you've ignored me repeatedly.
I apologize.
Not a problem.
I've had lots of technical challenges this morning.
So I wanted to comment on the Engage group and then on the Citizens Academy group. The value to me of the Engage group was, one, having some people with different backgrounds let us know how they felt about things, and being face-to-face with many of the people in the leadership group in the city. What I was hoping would also come out of this, and I mentioned this to you privately, was that, you know, we have some great support from the staff that are in the Engage group, but I really would like to see that continue to trickle out until we have an institutional culture in the city administration of inform and engage, because I don't believe we're there yet. As far as the Citizens Academy, I've been interested in something like this for probably 6 of the 8 years that I've been following our local government. I would question how you're going to get people into it and whether we're competing with Leadership Morgan Hill. The county has something like Citizens Academy 101, and they get their members recommended by the supervisors. So one way to get some people into a Citizens Academy might ask city council members to nominate people. But I guess I would urge you to take a look at how you got this group together in the first place, which I thought was a monumental achievement, and how you have managed in a couple of cases to get other groups of citizens to participate, whether it's the urban forest or Chris's rather broad reach in putting together a stakeholder group for the Bike and Parkways Master Plan. I mean, it can be done, and it refutes the statement we hear all the time that, oh, people in this community have such busy lives, they don't have time to pay attention to city government. So I like the idea of Citizens Academy or infomercials, or, you know, just ways to keep talking to the community and listening to the community, whether it's through an academy or some other mechanism. So it's been an interesting year. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Doug. Really appreciate your input and your perspective. And Michelle, am I not seeing people's hands?
No, Doug's hand wasn't showing as raised for some reason, so I'm glad he spoke up.
Okay, thank you so much, Doug. Is there someone else who would like to jump in?
Rick?
So yeah, I would again like to reiterate and say thank you to city staff for everything that you guys did. I mean, you put a lot of time into this, a lot of effort, and I think we all appreciate it. I do think a Citizens Academy would be a good thing to do, and continue in this effort. You know, you might evaluate whether it's a little bit shorter than a whole year.
Yeah.
Maybe a 6-month stint would be easier for people to hang in there the whole time. I was amazed when you went through all the items that the city and the citizens have gone through this year, from Trammell Crow to the Ford store, Garlic Festival. My stepdaughter was right there when that happened. And the Shoe Palace, and COVID, and now civil unrest. It's been an amazing year. And I know I've been at work the whole time, and we catch ourselves. People at work are grouchy. You know, they're just going through, everybody's going through some stress, etc. And we have to remind ourselves constantly to, you know, kind of lighten up and look at the bright side of things. I mean, for example, you know, we're a medical manufacturer, so we're privileged to actually be working and have no financial issues, etc. So again, I just want to thank all you guys and thank everybody in this group for really spending time and effort to getting to know things and your input. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And if I could just make sure that, oh, go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to say I have 27 years of experience with the city, and every year, everything, you know, we get together annually for budgets and things like that. It proves how fantastic our staff is. The level of support of the staff through this process has been absolutely phenomenal. Maybe we didn't get exposed to all the staff, but the staff that we got exposed to has really just been there every step of the way. And I just want to thank you as the leader of that group and the staff itself for, again, doing a phenomenal job. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to make sure that we're definitely realizing that Chris Keone and Edith Ramirez and Michelle Bigelow and Harjot, who isn't here this morning, Dad and Christina, and Hillary Holman, who's been very much in the background, and then other staff as too. In one way or another, our entire leadership team has been involved with this. Even if, and I think you heard from all of them, truthfully, not like every time, but yes, I mean, it has been a huge undertaking that everybody worked very, very hard on. And it was an incredible team effort. I mean, it's been an amazing team effort. So, anyone else? Michelle McKay, Jody.
Can you hear me? I'm unmuting myself.
Yes, hi, Michelle.
So I also want to say what an incredible experience it has been. And what's unique about my perspective of listening, to all the conversations that we've had together over a year, and then just these very intimate conversations, is many of you know that I could have a perspective drilled in my head just based on who I'm married to, right? So I have all of, this information coming in, but truth be told, I work all week long as well. And so what has been very important for me, and what I have learned a lot, is despite all the information and how it comes into my household, I needed to learn and understand it for myself, from my perspective as a person who is working primarily outside of Morgan Hill, as a person who honestly does not have a lot of time to look at the material, that my spouse has a chance to look at, and then to think about it the way that he thinks about it. So I needed to come to my own conclusions. I needed to understand what was important for me now, the way that now in this time, and the way and amount of time I want to give back to the community. So I want to say it's been very important for me to understand at my pace. Staff is incredible. I can't tell you how patient everyone has been trying to teach me and teach all of us. I'm very impressed. And I guess I would say, I'd like to think that I represent the very passionate resident who really wants to do everything for the city, but only has a certain amount of time to learn and understand. And so I would encourage people who, like me, who are very passionate, with very little time, to go through something like a Citizens Academy, or to have access to folks like you all on the phone, including non-city staff. There's an incredible amount of information here to become well-informed. And then once I am well-informed and feeling confident, I will be reaching out to, I think, members of the community who may not normally want to participate. And Roger and Sally, I agree with you. I think that there is an opportunity to bring more people in, especially the underrepresented areas of our city, who may not understand what's going on, may not have a foundation for it, may not even have an appreciation, but these are all members of our community that we need to bring in. So thank you all for hearing my perspective of it. And yeah, now I can have a real seriously great debate with my spouse at home, because I'm informed with my own opinion.
Glad we could support that, Michelle. Anyone who has not spoken, I don't want to force people, but would love to hear perspectives from those of you who are here. I'm not seeing hands. I do want to ask a little bit, just doing a time check here. Looks like we've still got good time. There's different ways that Citizens Academies and so forth run. Some do it over a period of weeks. Some do it over a period of months. And I think somewhere between 6 and 8 meetings is probably about right, and probably a shorter amount of information and more opportunity for dialogue. So it probably still comes out to be a 2-hour meeting. But I guess what I've been going back and forth in my own mind, thinking about this, and if we have the bandwidth as we continue to look at budget cuts, and who knows what we may be looking at in the months ahead. But 6 months still is a pretty long commitment for people who have busy lives, and so I don't know. Do you think like 6 months is better, or a couple of like 6 to 8 weeks in a row where you've got that one evening meeting or something, or even if it was a Saturday meeting, I don't know which is better or worse. Which do you think is more appealing? And I suppose it probably is very dependent on, individual lives and what's going on in them. But Jennifer.
I would hate to see it clustered too close together, because after each of our sessions that we have, someone like myself and like Michelle was saying, we have to have time to process. We have to be able to look at the information that was given to us and make it fit into our mindset and make adjustments to our mindset. So I don't think 6 months is too long of a time if somebody is really committed to learning, and once they get into it, I think they will grow into it and want to be there. Because for me, it was, a lot of it was not new information for me, obviously because of my spouse, but it was nice to be able to sit in there and get some factual information, that I had some numbers and some ideas and a new vocabulary to use. Enterprise funds, those kinds of things that don't immediately roll off your tongue. And so all of those things were good. And I would like to add my thanks to you and the city staff and the whole team. You left out Leslie Little's name for one of the people, so I'm going to put her name in there. You guys did a phenomenal job, and you were very patient with us. And I, for one, appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, that's very good input. Okay, and I don't know if others have thoughts. The other thing I guess I would like to, since I think Doug brought up, would we be competing with Leadership Morgan Hill? And I personally have been through Leadership Morgan Hill, and I was on the board for a while, and I know that several of you have as well. I honestly wouldn't see it as competing. I would see it as a complement. What we covered is much more detail than any of the interaction. There are days in Leadership Morgan Hill that are about local government. There is a local government day, there's a public safety day, there's a day about economic development. I don't know. Actually, maybe it'd be worth a conversation with the Board of Leadership Morgan Hill to just kind of, flesh that out. And because we certainly would not want to be seen as competing, we would want to see it as a complement for people who wanted a deeper dive into government specifically. Leadership Morgan Hill, in my mind, is much broader and touches on so many other things, but that's certainly something to consider for sure. Plus, we wouldn't include a project in this. You can participate in this and not have to have a project at the end. Caitlin.
That I've heard some professors say before that there's this interesting thing that happens where everybody thinks that they need to take a leadership class. And I think Leadership Morgan Hill has a really important role, and I love the work that they do, but not every participant in the democracy has to be a leader, but every participant in democracy has to be well-informed, or should be well-informed. And so if you look at it that way, I think they are complementary ideas, that there are some restrictions for leadership. Like both Michelle and Rick said, if you work 5 days a week, you can't participate in leadership because many of their events happen on Fridays. It's not a program that people who have unflexible work schedules are able to participate in, and there is a cost associated with it. So I think that if what we're trying to do is educate everyone and not just the people who want to emerge as leaders of our city, but people who want to be informed, then I do think that it is not a separate thing, but a complementary program. I still think maybe a conversation with leadership so that they understand we're not trying to step on toes, that it is, complementary is probably a good idea. But I certainly still see the need for it.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm not sure who's showing up as Hoagie. Does anyone know who that is? Who shows up? As
Charles.
Oh, Charles, you've been very quiet through all of this. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Maybe he's not there.
I think he's having problems with his audio today because he tried to speak earlier.
Oh, did he? Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. And then there's one other phone number. Oh, that might be Sergio. I don't know. One is Doug, and then there's another phone number that I'm not sure who that belongs to. Michelle, do you know who that other phone number is?
No.
I wonder if that's Sergio, because I know he... Okay, I'm not hearing anything from anybody. Oh, Kathy is raising her hand. Go ahead, Kathy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Coming in at the end here, I haven't been a big participant in this, but have received a lot of benefit from both the Engage group meetings and also the CAG meetings. So I wanted to echo everyone's comments on how great the city staff is, how wonderful you are to deal with, what you do for the city, and then also compliment the people who pulled together the CAG group, Caitlin and Nick and Jody and all of those folks. So I've just got a lot going on in my life right now, and it's hard for me to get really engaged in this, but I appreciate very much the opportunity to learn and develop a better understanding of what's going on in the city, and try to figure out how I can reach out and help educate other people. My challenge is I don't do social media. I don't want to get engaged in that, and for the very same reasons that Steve brought up. So I'm trying to share it in other ways. Jody at one point in time in our CAG meetings brought up, so as president right now of the Morgan Hill Historical Society, I'm going to work with the board on how we can share this with our contacts and get the word out that way, because the city budget impacts the resources that we have for our historical resources.
Right.
So again, I want to very much thank and appreciate everyone, and I will continue to do what I can to help support the group. So that's it. Thanks.
Anyone else who wanted to share? Thank you so much, Kathy. And certainly social media is not the only way to share information. Absolutely, positively. It is a powerful way that can easily be amplified quickly and with low cost, but there's still the good old-fashioned ways of communicating that are of significant value as well. And I certainly am all for just personal conversations, personal conversations, and being willing to share them in different forums, and not always with the people you know the best. So, but newsletters, emails, letters or articles in our local newspapers, those are all good things as well. Anyone else want to say anything, just in general, or any other type of feedback? And I think we're getting to a point where we'll probably be able to wrap this up just a bit early. Not seeing anything.
You don't get a good breakfast like you used to provide there.
I know, I know.
I am getting hungry, so I have to.
Well, I have to say, I will tell you, it makes it a lot simpler for people like Michelle and I when we're not running around trying to get refreshments before the meeting or the day before. But yes, I was thinking that this morning. Gosh, it's so simple to just sit down and jump onto this, which is another thing that I think I know we as city staff, and I think probably others too, are realizing, you know, this is a powerful tool to use a lot more, even when we can all be together, just for convenience sake. And because of the fact that you could be most anywhere and still pop on. And so it makes participation a lot easier. I personally really enjoy face-to-face contact and in-person contact. And, you know, I think a lot of people do. So it's not to do away with that, but I think it opens up possibilities for ways to do things, even when we can't all be together, that may make it easier for more people to participate, you know, which is a really good thing. We've had, honestly, more public participation in our council meetings, you know, we started these weekly town halls since we've had shelter in place than I'm guessing we've ever had. I certainly can't speak for the whole history of Morgan Hill, but I mean, it's really been awesome. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people that, you know, being able to join these calls this way has made it so much easier. So I think it's definitely this or something similar is a tool that we'll have to be incorporating into our other ways of connecting as we go forward, even when we can be together. So if there's nothing else, I just really, really from the bottom of my heart, so I have a lot of emotions, so I hope I don't get a little tears. I'm noticing I'm a lot more emotional these days in this very weird way that things are unfolding and that I'm living and that, you know, everybody has their own thing. But I have just so appreciated all of you and many people who aren't with us on the call today, and your investment in this community, your willingness to interact with staff in such a respectful and positive way, even if you don't agree with everything we have to share. And for me, that's so important that there be these forums where we can have those positive conversations, civil discourse, you know, where we don't have to necessarily see things eye to eye, but we can be respectful of what the other thinks and has to share. And we just need that so desperately at this time. We need those opportunities to have differing opinions on the table and to be able to talk through them in a respectful, thoughtful manner. And this group has certainly demonstrated that. And we have had some differing opinions for sure. In this moment, we probably, there's a few of us who have differing opinions. And, you know, we started off with a much broader group, and we did that intentionally. I think originally, although they didn't all come to the first meeting, we had about 80 people who were very interested and kind of were in there in the background. And we knew that it would decrease over time. But a lot of people who even aren't coming to the meetings still are getting the same information. And that I see as positive too, because it's still another way to be engaged and pay attention to what's going on. But I just sincerely thank you. And I know that the city staff, those that are on this call, those that are not, our whole leadership team, the city council, I know that everyone has been so appreciative of the investment of time that you've made, the seriousness that you placed on this, the priority. And, you know, I'm not sure if it's always been completely visible, but the input you've provided has truly informed both city staff and ultimately council in many areas. And, you know, that has been positive, and that was a goal in this. And while I know I, for one, could not ever have dreamed up the year that we have had and all the impacts that, I mean, you know, I guess I felt like I really should note, because all those things were impactful in people's lives, and they were impactful for staff. And, you know, trying to keep this rolling in the midst of so many hard and difficult things has been quite an undertaking. And for all of you to stay committed during these various things has been so incredible. But just thank you, thank you, thank you. And I know that many of you obviously are going to continue to stay engaged with each other. This certainly is not meaning we're not going to be engaging with you. You all are awesome and wonderful resources now going forward. Many of you have been in the past as well. And, you know, other thoughts, ideas that might come to mind as you think about this more, please reach out because we'd love to hear them. And, you know, I know for me, figuring out how, even in the midst of cutting resources, we could move forward with some type of a Citizens Academy is going to be a priority. Because, you know, we need to have knowledgeable community members. We need, I like the way, Caitlin, that you worded that. You know, we all don't need to be leaders, for sure. As a matter of fact, when there's too many leaders in the room, that can be an issue. We need informed community members, participants, people who understand. Whether or not they want to be a leader doesn't really matter. It's, you know, people who understand and know how their government runs, what the government is able to do and not do, how it's funded, where the funding comes from, and the challenges that a community like ours that is, you know, we have a small budget. We have small revenue sources in comparison to others. So I would love anyone who might have interest in providing either feedback or helping me brainstorm a little bit about a Citizens Academy to let me know as well. And we'll probably be tapping on shoulders, you know, just like if we are able to move forward, to tell people and help get different and diverse groups of people involved in anything we might be able to do as we go into the future. So Edith or Chris or Michelle or Dat, I know Christina feels very bad that she was not able to be here. I hope that she's going to be doing okay with that situation. Is there anything you would like to add before we sign off for the day?
Michelle
Have a
here.
good weekend, everybody. Bye.
Okay.
I just want to echo Maureen's comments and thank you so much for your candor and your honesty and for taking the time. Your feedback has been tremendous to how we look at what we do and to just keep fresh ideas in our mind. We really appreciate it so much. And I personally reflect back on so many individual conversations I've had with you, and it's just helped to give me a different perspective. You know, we each are so close to what we do that sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, if you will, because you're just so in it. And all of you have really given me different insights, and I know given our team different insights. So I just like to say thank you so much for always just being so direct and candid and taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else? Chris is having a problem with his audio, it looks like. Okay, well then I'm going to say have a wonderful weekend. There are new ways to enjoy your weekends now, a few of them. So hope you're able to explore some of those. You know, keep focusing on social distancing, keep wearing your masks when you're out and about. We still have to worry about COVID-19, so it's not over yet, but it's nice to know that some things are loosening up and we have more opportunities to see each other and connect. So thank you, have a great weekend, and be well. Bye all.